Hare Krishna. So, too much light over there. Hold on. I'm going to move a little bit. Okay. Tonight we're going to talk about, we're back in Alachua, of all places. It's been a long time. Here we are. And we're going to talk about, the title of the class was, we gave it Self-Envy and Loving the Self. And I had initially spoken about this in Mayapur. I think we gave one class, which was in April, and I wanted to start a topic on self-love because it's something that is needed. And I just had a discussion yesterday with one devotee who was asking me if I had taught anything about self-love, and he said that we don't find it in our scripture. And I said, we actually find it, but it's kind of in a bit of a covered way, because self-love sounds like more of a psychological term, or more of something that would be in the realm of dealing with emotions and so forth, and not directly spiritual per se, but it's actually there. Indirectly, because I would say that every time Prabhupada is telling us that you should use this life to go back to Godhead, indirectly he's saying, love yourself enough that you would put your energy and your time and your focus and your intention on getting out of the material world. And a lot of times, Prabhupada would explain our predicament. And he would explain the special opportunity we have by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. So we should take advantage. So it's really an appeal to care for yourself in that sense. There's a lecture I've spoken about before where Prabhupada said, never leave Krishna consciousness. And no matter what happens, don't leave. In other words, just if you look at it like taking care of your health, and a teacher saying, do this, do that, take care of yourself. But Prabhupada is basically saying the same thing. He's saying, take care of yourself. So, we have nice laundry in the background. Maybe we have underwear. Underwear and laundry. We just got back. Okay. Interesting. This room is my wife's office now. It's doubling as the laundry room. And, yeah. It's a mess. Anyway. Hare Krishna. So, that sense, you could say every time Prabhupada is saying, be Krishna conscious, then I'm going to hold on a second, because I've got to do something with the light. So, when Prabhupada's saying, be Krishna conscious, then he's really saying, take care of yourself, love yourself, be kind to yourself. Every time Prabhupada says, take care of your spiritual life, isn't he really saying, take care of yourself? Because my experience is, that some people, especially people who allow their lives to glide down, who become addicted, who just on the material level, their lives become a mess because they don't care. They don't care enough about themselves to discipline themselves to do what they have to do. So, therefore I think we could say every time Prabhupada says, care for your spiritual life, he's also saying, you care for yourself. And okay, I'm going to put the lights on now. I'm trying to get the right light in here. Oh, Maybe I move back a little. Kind of a... I've done so many videos, I've become like obsessed with good lighting. And it's hard to get good lighting, as you can see. I'm too close to the window. Every time I touch the desk, it shakes the stand. I'm completely unprepared, as I was just on a phone call. Actually 3 phone calls before we did this. And can't even find the microphone that's supposed to go in. I'm like totally not ready, but I mean, I'm ready what to say, I'm just not ready to broadcast, but we'll do our best. And you'll just see this effulgence. What can we do? So, then Prabhupada has used the term self-envy. And something interesting happened, is that I wrote an article. I was actually writing, I wrote an article, which was for my newsletter, and then it became an article for a book we're putting together. Just taking all the articles I've written and putting them in chapters in a book. So the devotee, my god sister, was editing it when she saw the chapter title. The chapter title was Envious of Yourself. And actually, I'm going to read that article. I didn't have time to bring it up yet. And this is from the new book called Living the Wisdom of Bhakti. And we just had the cover designed the other day. Now I have to find... I should have done this before. I have to find the title of this. And I don't know if we changed the title. This is the edited version. So you have to excuse me. But anyway, the title at that time was Envious of Yourself, or Envious of Oneself, Self-Envy. We changed it, Self-Envy. And so, you know, at that point the title was Envious of Yourself, and then when she was editing it, she wrote in the comments, it said, you can't say that because that's not a term that we use, self-envy, self-love, like that. And then I went through Prabhupada's books and I wrote her back and I gave her 6 references where Prabhupada used the word self-envy. Hold on a second. Okay, we have nice, all right, piles of laundry. Hold on a second, because people are going to see this for the next 10,000 years. I don't want them to be looking at laundry. Hare Krishna. Yes, okay. So I had to show her there were 6 references in Prabhupada's books about self-envy. So, and then Prabhupada described what he meant by self-envy, which is really the opposite of self-love. And Prabhupada said, basically, spiritual suicide, if you don't take advantage of Krishna consciousness, then that's self-envy. In other words, you're working against your own self-interest. And because you have free will, you can do that. You can get good instruction but not take advantage of it. And so Prabhupada called that being envious of your own self, which is an interesting term. But envy in Sanskrit really means violence. It doesn't mean I'm jealous of myself. It means more that I'm violent to myself. So self-envy could mean self-violence. And so, obviously, that's the opposite of self-love. So Prabhupada did use these terms. I know in modern psychology they might be used more extensively, more directly, perhaps in ways which don't exactly apply to us. But it is a reality that many of us who have this some degree of self-envy or some lack of self-love will tend to be slack in our own devotional service because we won't care that much. How were your rounds today? No, they weren't very good. Why? I don't know, I just don't care. That is a lack of self-love. We should care, because we could go back to Godhead in this lifetime. Don't we care? Good morning in India, good evening in... Oh, Bhakti, what time is it? It must be late for you. It's 6:30 here. It must be like 11:30 p.m. for you, right? Yeah, she's willing to stay up because it's important. So, I wanted to make that point that we shouldn't think that this is not part of Krishna consciousness, because it is. Like my white shirt and my effulgence is like, it's just amazing. Let's see if I can make it darker. Make my effulgence darker. I just did. Too dark, huh? Okay. So, yeah. So, oh my God. It's 1:40 a.m. in Lithuania. Hare Krishna. 4:10 a.m. 4:10 a.m. Where are you? 4:10 a.m. In India. Oh my God. Yeah, maybe. Crazy. I'm going to do class at a different... Well, tomorrow we're going to do class at 8:30 a.m. so that no one has to stay up late. 8:30 a.m. You'll have to stay up late if you're in Australia, but everywhere else it should be good. Turn the volume up. If I could find the microphone. I have the microphone. All right, I have to get closer. Hare Krishna. All right. Natasha Leela. Natasha Leela. Is that better? Can you hear now? I don't know. I had a microphone. I'm so not ready. Was so not prepared to give this class. I'm moving in all day, just doing things just to get to zero. Then I picked up the microphone. I put it down somewhere and made some phone calls. And anyway, so this is the basic idea that I've discovered, that there has to be some sense of self-love, that I care enough about myself, I care enough about my spiritual life that I will do what's necessary. And the Prabhupada says that people care about their material life, but in Kali Yuga they don't care about their spiritual life. But it's it's symptomatic of the problem. So it's symptomatic of this general problem, I think. Trying to make it. Whoops! What did I do? I think I just spun the thing around. Okay, there I am. Okay, so every time I have a very unstable mic stand. Tomorrow morning we'll be more ready for this. This is like every time I touch the table, the camera shakes because it's not stable. Okay, so this is a chapter coming from a chapter which is going to be in my new book, which is called Living the Wisdom of Bhakti. In this chapter, I discuss the importance of taking personal responsibility for our own spiritual lives. Prabhupada often quoted the expression, "Man is the architect of his own fortune." Despite all the help or good association we get, ultimately, we have to do the spiritual work of improving ourselves to avoid self-envy and its detrimental effects. We have to do the spiritual work of improving us. In other words, we have to do the work. We have to do the spiritual work, which is synonymous, and not doing it means that we'd be envying ourselves. Okay, time to wake up. Where you and I are today in our spiritual lives is no accident. If we want to go further, we'll need to change or improve on something we are presently doing or not doing. And we will need to respond to some of our circumstances in a different way. Once in Los Angeles, Prabhupada said, ultimately, we must all fly our own airplane. What Prabhupada meant was that although he can teach us Krishna consciousness, give us his mercy, and even pray to Krishna on our behalf, He can't force us to be Krishna conscious. We have to do the work. In this sense, our spiritual advancement is really in our own hands. So we've talked about this, the balance of mercy and effort. And what we've discovered is that effort brings the mercy, and mercy is the byproduct of effort. So it's not that we have a lot to do. As I said here, spiritual advancement is really in our own hands. No one can chant our rounds for us, read for us, do devotional service for us. We all have access to the same knowledge and guidance, yet we utilize this bhakti process differently. How we apply the wisdom of bhakti is our choice. No one is choosing for us. So, first part of this article is just talking about taking responsibility to do the right thing. And the foundational principle is that taking responsibility, making the right choices, ultimately is going to require that we have some sense of taking care of our soul. There was a book called Care of the Soul. It wasn't about this, but that idea that I do care about what happens. I do care about my relation with Krishna. I do care about my future and so forth. We can't blame anyone for our lack of Krishna consciousness. We may want to blame or try to, but it doesn't help us progress. Blaming is an excuse for not taking responsibility. Some blame the past, their parents, their karma, their spouse, their jobs, or their leaders. How many excuses have you made or heard? I have made and heard hundreds. Yet, with every excuse we take a step away from Krishna, a step away from taking responsibility for our own spiritual advancement. I was just thinking today how there's a lot, but there are devotees who tend to focus on what's going wrong in ISKCON, what's wrong with leadership, what's wrong with the gurus, what's wrong with the GBC, what's wrong with the temple president, what's wrong with the devotees in general. And I'm doing a study on the nature of happiness because we're preparing to do some talks, maybe even do a course on happiness. So there are studies which show that happy people, they generate certain hormones like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. And it's like a hormone cocktail. And some of these happy hormones to actually keep you younger. And they have other hormones when you're negative that used to create like cortisol or cortisone. So being happy, you're healthier, you stay young longer, or at least you feel younger, look younger. So I thought it was interesting how some people are just very negative. They're always focused on the negative, and it's really bad for them. Like they can't be happy because somebody's doing something wrong. And they have to focus on it, and they have to criticize it, and they always have to talk about it. So it's just not a good idea. It's bad. Okay. Sometimes we believe that anyone in our situation would act the same way, that we are simply products of circumstances. Don't fool yourself. Some people do act differently. In other words, sometimes we're in a situation and we go, it's just the way it is, the way I am. Can't be any better. Anyone else in this situation would act in the same way. It's not always true. In many cases, they would act differently. Jayananda Prabhu, one of Prabhupada's early disciples, was hospitalized with leukemia. Although his body was falling apart, he rose every morning at 3:30 a.m. to perform his devotional activities, which included a full morning program. He also arranged to have regular Gita classes with other patients. Jayananda would walk around the hospital to meet people and to introduce them to Krishna and invite them to his class. Is that amazing? If I had been in his shoes, I probably wouldn't have done that. Most likely, I would have slept a lot and worried about my health, and I would have my excuses for doing so. After all, I have leukemia. When we don't do what may be possible for us to do, we often blame someone or something for our failure. It's best that we see blame for what it is, a rationalization for not doing as much as Krishna is asking us. You know, the thing about blame is that if you want something, if you really want it, it doesn't make any sense to blame. It just makes sense to work on it. We have this big, I don't know if you've seen Tamal Krishna Maharaj, a book was, a photographic book, large coffee table book, was produced by one of his disciples. Beautiful book. And he was a great inspiration for me. So this morning or last night, I was looking at the book and I was reading a quote, and he said, "My nature is that when I want to do something, I just focus on it, and that's all I think about, and then just work on it till I get there." And that's really the opposite of blame, because when you blame, you don't focus on it. You just focus on all the reasons you can't do it. So someone like Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he never focused on why he couldn't do something, only focused on how to do it. So that was his kind of attitude, to succeed in everything. And he always made sure he would succeed. And he was very competitive. That's there. But he took very good care of himself spiritually. And I was inspired by that. This book, I don't know where you can get it. The devotee who printed it is Radha Charan. He lives in China. It's not a common book. It may be out of print. I mean, it's probably cost a few $100s. It's a huge book. But maybe somehow you can look online and see. Anyway, so, Tamal Krishna Maharaj really took care of himself spiritually. And it was a very good example that he, I don't say it that he was selfish. I just say that he was wise. And he valued himself. He valued his spiritual life, and he always protected it. And I think that's very important, because a lot of times devotees, when they go through some difficult situation, they let their spiritual lives fall apart. And I think it's very important to develop this attitude where we're always taking care of our spiritual lives, where we don't let it, no matter what happens, we just don't let it fall apart. It's too valuable. And it's like, let me give you an example. It's a very common example for many devotees that they have a fear. I'm afraid if I go here, or I'm afraid if I do this, this will happen. I'm afraid if I see this, I will give into this sense, or I'll give into this desire, or I'll give into this attachment. I'm afraid if I do this, this will happen. And I think those are valid fears, and Prabhupada said we should be afraid of Maya, but I think there's a better way of thinking if we employ this idea of taking care of ourselves. And it's a mantra that I've used, and it's very powerful. When you think of a situation in which you don't trust yourself, because that's really what's being said. I don't know if I can trust myself. In this situation, I don't know if I can trust myself when I go back here, or I get this job, or this or that. I don't trust myself that I can be strong. I could fall down. I could minimize my sadhana, my chanting, and so forth. I'm afraid I might do that. So rather than focus on that fear, if you connect, as Tamal Krishna Maharaj did, with which I would call spiritual self-preservation, you could say something that, I know this is a concern, and I know it's a real concern that I do have this attachment and I do become weak in this situation. But I love myself too much to give into that. I love myself too much to put myself into that situation. Or you could say, I don't know if I can finish my rounds, even though I made a vow to my spiritual master. And then you can say, but I love myself too much to allow myself to do that. I don't know if I could follow the four regular principles my whole life, but I love myself too much to give in. So it's a powerful mantra. If you can connect with that emotion, that emotion of self-preservation, that I to satisfy my own spiritual master, to please Krishna, I have to take care of myself spiritually. I have to love my spiritual life, my spiritual practices. I have to love the instructions of my guru. I have to love Prabhupada's instructions. And in that way, love myself, I will love myself so much or too much that I would never give in to this situation. I would never do that to myself, because if there's a situation where I'm afraid I'll become attached to something or give in, then I see the ramifications of doing that, and I tell myself I would never do that to myself, because I know if I give in to this, this is what would happen. So can be a very powerful way of protecting ourselves by keying or gearing into this context of self-preservation, taking care of myself, loving myself. I love myself too much to allow myself to do that. I know I shouldn't do this. I'm attached to doing it, but I love myself too much, so I'm not going to do it. That's the idea. Try that. Just try that mantra. I love myself too much to allow myself to do this. Or I love myself so much, I will do this. I will chant. Why don't I chant 16 good rounds? Because I don't care. That's really the only answer. Ultimately, because I'm busy, it's this, that, I'm spiritually weak, this and that. But really, I don't care. That's the real answer. And then we can say, I love myself too much not to care. I love myself too much to chant bad rounds. I will not allow myself to chant bad rounds. I want to preserve my spiritual life to such a degree that I will take care of myself. So I really saw that in Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He really, he went very deep into Krishna consciousness. And we are meant to go deep into Krishna consciousness, and it's not selfish. It's what we're meant to do, to relish. Relishing Krishna consciousness is synonymous with becoming attached to Krishna and developing love of Krishna. So we're meant to do that. We're meant to go more deeply into relishing Krishna consciousness. And if we don't, if we minimize our hearing and chanting, minimize our seva in the name of whatever, material progress or whatever, we're really harming ourselves, and we should see it that way. Now let me turn the light on, and you'll see beautiful lights on the top of my head, but it's getting a little dark outside. Okay, that is even worse, isn't it? Let's move closer to the window. Hold on. Better? Trying to... Yeah, better. Okay. Okay, here's a conversation. We're talking about blaming someone else for failing. So it's a conversation. Guru Kripa, they say that when Krishna desires, I will serve him, but now he is not desiring. He's not inspiring me to do it. Prabhupada, what do you mean he's not inspiring you? He's directly saying, surrender to me. Isn't this his instruction? Isn't this for everyone? But they will say, he's not inspiring me personally. Prabhupada, just see how foolish people are. Krishna is saying directly, do this. Still they say, he's not inspiring. They say, only by Krishna's mercy I will be able to surrender. You have his mercy. so you have surrendered, but his mercy has not come to me, so I have, in other words, they're saying, you have his mercy, you're a devotee, I don't have his mercy, I haven't surrendered. Prabhupada, and if you don't accept the mercy, then whose fault is it? I'm giving you Krishna's mercy, you take it, if you not take it, then is it my fault? Krishna has eternally given us the freedom to reject him, and if we are determined to do so, then nothing will change our resolve. So, Prabhupada said, so you voluntarily accept this cycle of birth, and you don't accept Krishna, then who can help you? If you have decided to cut your own throat, how can I help you? You'll do it. Whenever you'll get opportunity, you'll cut your throat. How much I can give you protection? That is going on. They have no faith. So, this was also Prabhupada's example, as I said earlier, or his definition of self-envy, that he once gave the example, if you go off in a secluded place and cut your throat, and nobody can help you. And so it's like, we have this concept of spiritual suicide, or the concept of killing the soul. So this is what Prabhupada means, that if we minimize our spiritual life, it's a kind of spiritual suicide. And it's like this example he gives. That, it's not, what Prabhupada's saying is not magic. It's like you have to care. So he gives the instruction, but we have to care enough to follow it. We can't just say, yeah, that's good instruction, and I can't follow it, I'm too weak, this and that. That's how Prabhupada defines being envious of ourselves, or having a lack of self-love. So, when Prabhupada gives an instruction, then if we think, this instruction is for my welfare, and if I actually love myself, I'll follow it. If I actually want to do what's really in my best interest, in my highest self-interest, I'll follow these instructions. And it's that little voice that comes from this lack of self-love that says, I don't care. But in fact, we do care. We don't want the ramifications that come from not following. So actually, we do care, but there's something going on inside of us that needs to be strengthened so we care more. And if we just care a little more, it can make a big difference in your spiritual life. You'll chant better, you'll read more, you'll be more strict, you'll get up earlier, you'll look, because these are all acts of self-love, self-care. We think, get up so early, it's so hard. It's an act of self-love. We think it's difficult to focus on our japa. It's an act of self-love. If you increase that psychology of caring for yourself, it's easier to get up early. It's easier to chant better because it becomes like a way of being. So it's really, really important. And I like this devotee said, he said, where are we going to find shlokas, that talk directly about this? It's spoken of indirectly, but I'm hoping that this makes sense to you, that you put it within a context that often when we become slack in Krishna consciousness, which we may attribute to being lazy or weak, it may have, and often does have, if not always has, some element of just a lack of care, a spiritual, what we could call a spiritual suicidal tendency. I just don't care. Or I'm not worth it. That's more of a psychological problem. I'm not worth it. Krishna doesn't care. If you're not worth it, why did Prabhupada come? Why did he write his books? Because Prabhupada wants everyone. Because to go back to Krishna, because Krishna wants everyone. So everyone's worth it. Unfortunately, sometimes we think we're not worth it, but Krishna doesn't think that way. Prabhupada doesn't think that way. So even if I think I'm not worth it, I should do it for them because they think I'm worth it. So to satisfy them, I should do it. And this feeling that I'm not worth it it's a real enemy to our spiritual progress. And so we have to be able to get over that. You are worth it. In Krishna's eyes, you're worth it. Krishna is waiting for you. Not for you as a physical being, but as a spirit soul. In rasa with Krishna, he's waiting for that. Why Bilva Mangala Thakur went to Vrindavan to worship Krishna is one of my favorite stories, told in detail by Srila Prabhupada to Allen Ginsberg. And this is what Prabhupada said. In his early life, Bilva Mangala Thakur was an elevated devotee. But later on, he became completely bewildered by the material energy. One of the activities he regularly engaged in was visiting a prostitute named Chintamani. One day he arrived at her house during the height of a fierce storm after undergoing an arduous journey. It was also the night of his father's funeral, which he had left early in order to meet Chintamani. When she saw him, she was totally amazed that he would go through so much trouble to meet her, even at the risk of his own safety. She knew he had been a great devotee of Krishna when he was younger, so she spontaneously said, "Look at what you did to get here. Look at all the trouble you took, practically risking your life to enjoy with me. Just think what a great devotee you would be and how glorious your life could be if you had that much devotion for Krishna." Bilva Mangala Thakur's extreme endeavors to enjoy the pleasures of the material world exemplify a verse from the Bhagavatam. 4:23-28 on self-envy. Any person who engages himself within this material world in performing activities that necessitate great struggle, and who, after obtaining a human form of life, which is a chance to attain liberation from miseries, undertakes the difficult task of fruitive activities, must be considered to be cheated and envious of his own self. So there we have that phrase, envious of one's own self. Isn't that interesting? And again, envy in Sanskrit, one of the meanings is violence. As Prabhupada said, we're envious of the cows. When we eat the cows, when we eat animals, we're envious of them. And of course, none of us want to be animals who are slaughtered. So it means we're not, by not allowing another living entity to live, we're considered envious in the meaning of envy, dvesha, in Sanskrit. So, by not allowing our spiritual lives to grow, we become envious of ourselves. By destroying our spiritual lives, we become envious of ourselves. We may be taking very good care for ourselves materially and neglecting our spiritual life. We're envious of the soul, the real self. So that's interesting. Would everyone have reacted in the same way as Bilva Mangala Thakur? Most men would likely think, there's no way in the world I'm going to miss out on enjoying with this woman after taking so much trouble to get here. Bilva Mangala could have said what any normal, lusty old man would have said. What? You expect me to give up everything for Krishna and go to Vrindavan? You must be crazy. Everyone knows that's impossible. The reality is that everyone doesn't know that it is impossible. Some people do actually give up their bad habits and surrender to Krishna, and some do it immediately after reading the Bhagavad Gita. So, along with dropping the everyone knows that blank mentality, I suggest we also drop the anyone in my situation would do that frame of mind. What you're really saying when you generalize like this is, it is my belief that blank. And you are convincing yourself that you can't do something you really need to do, or that you can't serve Krishna the way you'd like to. I think one of the, one of the great pains in life is knowing what to do and not doing it. So, again, we go back to this concept of that I will not allow myself, or I will not allow myself to do something which will be damaging, which will be detrimental to my spiritual life. At least not voluntarily, not consciously, not intentionally. Sometimes we may do it, we may slip, but I protect myself. I take care of my creeper. I care about my creeper to the point I wouldn't allow myself to do anything detrimental. Sindulali's going to go to sleep now. It's 2 a.m. in Russia. Yeah. Go to bed at 9 o'clock and get up at 2 a.m. Not the other way around. Oh, yeah. If you can get up at 2 a.m. every day, wow. I was just thinking about it last night. I was thinking, 2 a.m., that's like, we should all get up at 2 a.m. I was just thinking how blissful that will be. And unfortunately, last night I stayed up till like 12:30. For some reason, I couldn't sleep. So it was hard to get up at 2 a.m., going to bed at 12:30, and I didn't quite make it. But these are the kind of thoughts you have when you're thinking about nourishing your spiritual life. You think about how you can do things which maybe ordinarily would appear to be austere or difficult, but to you they don't appear that way because it's coming from a self-care perspective. Like, you exercise and it's hard, and if you go to a gym, you're like, if you're doing bodybuilding, when you get to that point where it's really hard, that's when the coach will put a trainer will push you, just do more, and you're burning your arms or legs and feel like you're on fire. That's when you build muscle. So you do it because it's good for you, and so the pain in a sense feels good. You like doing it. So many devotees like austerity because they know it's good for them. So the austerity physically may be difficult from the perspective of sense gratification, but because they know it's good for them, they feel pleasure in it. And so when you're in that mood of taking care of yourself, you can think thoughts like, well, it'd be really nice to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and chant and read. And, otherwise, you just think, 2 o'clock is so early, I would suffer. And so in the name of loving and taking care of yourself, sometimes it's really the opposite. We're neglecting our spiritual life. So it's something to think about. It's something to practice and think about what Prabhupada is saying here. Like that anyone who's working hard for fruitive activities is actually envious of themselves. So Bainarati is going to go to sleep. And yeah, it'll be, hopefully, if the internet doesn't crash, it'll be posted on Facebook. But the result of this lecture is everyone starts going to bed early and getting up early. That'll have an amazing effect on your Krishna consciousness. So now, this section is entitled, Envious of Our Own Selves. Srila Prabhupada was once asked the following question. In your books, you mention that if one does not take time to understand how his activities are producing his next life, then one actually becomes envious of his own self. Can you further explain that? Because as we said, the concept of being envious of your own self, it's not a concept that makes sense in how we understand the word envy. I'm going to be envious of myself. I love myself. I only want to gratify myself. So Prabhupada answers this. Prabhupada says, yes. If he's going to become a dog in his next life and he does not take precaution, then is he not envying himself? Like, you could fall into the animal species. You could suffer for committing sin, and you go ahead and do it anyway. So that means what? You're envious of yourself. You're doing something that's going to put yourself in a really bad position. So that means you're envious. Like, there's danger ahead, and you walk into it, and you'll suffer. That means you're envious of yourself. At least it means you're not taking care of yourself. If we do anything that hurts ourselves, on some level we are acting out of self-envy. If we are truly interested in our own welfare, we will be careful to only do things to benefit ourselves, which also means doing things that are beneficial to others, because when we benefit others, we benefit. The problem is that we are conditioned to act in ways that are not always in our highest interest, and that unfortunately often harm our spiritual lives. Worse, we are conditioned to find excuses for these failings. So it's like we do something that's detrimental to our spiritual life, and then on top of that, what's worse is we find an excuse. Well, it's not my fault. So that's like salt on the wound, because we have to admit it's our fault to improve it. And all of you late nighters, in exactly 11 hours and 15 minutes, there's going to be another class, which will be tomorrow morning, our time, and it'll be good for you. It'll be your afternoon. So this is a room conversation, June 15th, 1975. Prabhupada uses the term atmaha to explain self-envy as the condition of not taking advantage of our lives to advance in Krishna consciousness. Ha means to kill. So atmaha means killer of the self, which is kind of a paradox, but Prabhupada's using it in the sense of not killing the soul, but killing your spiritual life. So anyone who does not take to this Krishna consciousness movement, he is most unfortunate. Atmaha, he is killing himself. Just see. If one kills himself, who can save him? You keep your knife within the pocket, and as soon as there is nobody, you kill yourself. Then who can save you? So anyone who is not taking to this Krishna consciousness movement is killing himself. That's all. And we are canvassing. Please take to this. Free yourself. That is our duty as servant of Krishna. He may take or not take, it doesn't matter. It is our duty as Krishna's servant to speak. So yeah, if you don't take the Krishna consciousness, you don't take the spiritual life, you're killing yourself. Prabhupada further elucidates this point on Atmaha in 2 lectures. So you see that this topic is discussed, not so much in psychological terms, but there are psychological ramifications. So this process has to be adopted if you're actually serious to understand Krishna. And if you do not try to understand Krishna, then you are making suicide. Atmaha. They have been described in the Shastra, Atmaha. If I cut my throat, myself, then who can save me? So people do not understand it. And Narottam Das Thakur, who understands, he has sung Hari Hari Bipale Janama Gainu Manusha Janama Paya Radha Krishna Nabhajya Janiya Shuniya Bishak Kainu. That means I came to this human form of life and trying to enjoy it, I was swallowing poison. So it is our duty, of course, as servant of Krishna to awaken everyone to Krishna consciousness by this process of Sankirtan movement. But people should take it seriously, that without taking to Krishna consciousness, one is making suicide. He's cutting his own throat or drinking poison. If you like to drink poison, nobody can check you. That's a fact. If you want to cut your throat, your own self, nobody can check you. But this is not very good business. We have got this human form of life to understand Krishna. That is the only business. That is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching and Krishna's teaching personally in Bhagavad Gita. Why should we not take advantage of these things and make our life successful? Why we should be so much foolish, but they are, I do not know why they're not taking to Krishna consciousness. They will take to so many other bogus things, but they will not take to Krishna. So, again, as I was saying earlier, Prabhupada here he's asking us, and he's telling us, look, you've got a human form of life. Mahaprabhu is here. Bhagavad Gita is here. Why don't you take advantage of these things? And if you don't take advantage, what are you doing? You're killing yourself. He's trying to impress this idea that if you just take care of yourself materially and not spiritually, you're actually committing suicide, spiritual suicide. You're harming yourself, or in the other example, you're cutting your throat. So it's good for us to remember these analogies, that if I'm lax in my spiritual life, it's just like I'm cutting my throat. Okay, everyone is up late, can go to sleep. Or you can stay up all night and not sleep tomorrow. Your choice. But in 11 hours, we're going to be giving class again. So, another lecture. Atmaha means suicide. If you cut your throat yourself, who can save you? So we should not become Atmaha and spoil this life. Durlabam manusham janma tad apya dhruvam artadam. From Bhagavatam 7:6-1. This human form of life, durlabam. After many, many millions of evolution, we have got it, so it is very durlaba. Jalajal nava laksh. Durlaba means rare. Jalajanava lakshani stavhara laksha vimshati padma purana. That listed 8,400,000 species of life, what they are. And we've got human life. Really, it's really rare. It's really special. We've got this opportunity by the grace of God, or the material nature has given us this opportunity. Now we should utilize it. This is Krishna consciousness movement. Don't spoil it. So again, Prabhupada if you reword that, Prabhupada's saying, give a human form of life, take care of yourself. Like love yourself. Mm-hmm. So, we lost 3 people to sleep, we're up late, and we're losing 1 to a morning walk. But don't worry, it's all recorded, you can see it later. So, when you go on your morning walk to chant japa, nourish yourself with good japa. Think that I need to nourish myself with good japa, like I need to nourish myself with good food. Good japa is important. You'll chant better rounds that way. So here again, Prabhupada is asking us, you've got this human form of life, take care. This is really, again, saying, take care of yourself. So now we have a question for you. Do you do anything consciously or unconsciously that hurts yourself materially or spiritually? Of course we do. I do it when I don't chant my rounds attentively, when I don't give myself quality time for my spiritual practice, when I neglect my health, when I overwork and waste time in idle talk and frivolous activities. I've seen that some devotees are so conditioned to doing the wrong things that they cannot sustain the devotional practices that would keep them happy in Krishna consciousness. Thus they allow old habits to dominate their lives, causing them to do things that are self-destructive. Like we all know certain things we do which are not helpful for our spiritual life, even for our material life, and sometimes we become habituated to doing them. And I think that if we have a little more, if we intensify this content habits, at least we'll have more power to do it. We just have to care more. Because Maya's job is that you will not care for your spiritual life. She doesn't want you to care. She just wants you to care for your material life, and she wants you to work so hard that you'll have no time for Krishna consciousness. That's her job. So we need to be aware of that. That's the undercurrent that's feeding us from the material energy. You shouldn't take so much time for your spiritual life. You should really take it for your material life, advance materially. In your spiritual life, it'll, whatever, it'll come later. I have seen that some devotees are so conditioned to doing the wrong things that they cannot sustain the devotional practices that would keep them happy in Krishna consciousness. Thus they allow old habits to dominate their lives, causing them to do things that are self-destructive. One of these is harming others, which is also characteristic of self-envy, according to Bhagavatam. Quote, this is 6:1642. A person who commits murder is envious of himself, and also the person he has killed. For the result of committing murder is that he will be arrested and hanged. So again, Prabhupada's saying self-envy means anything we do which harms ourselves. That's considered self-envy. Thus we cannot harm another being without harming ourselves. in this case. I harm another person, I'll suffer, so I harm myself. Self-destructive habits can be due to low self-esteem. They tend to struggle more with sadhana because they don't love themselves or value themselves enough to take care of their spiritual lives well. They tend to struggle. That should be corrected. I'm going to correct it right now. My editor, why didn't you correct it? Devotees tend to struggle more with sadhana because they don't love themselves or value themselves enough to take care of their spiritual lives. Of course, there could be, other reasons. I'm just lazy, this and that. But for the sake of this article, or the sake of this talk, I would like you to consider that as the reason that I just don't, maybe low self-esteem means I don't feel I'm worth it. I don't really care about myself. I'm not worth taking care of myself. So, also, a person taking care of themselves materially but neglecting their spiritual lives is neglecting themselves in the highest and deepest sense. Self-envy thus becomes camouflaged in various ways, even as so-called self-care. So you could care for yourself materially but not spiritually. Okay, we want to finish up. We're almost finished. If we are honest with ourselves, we will acknowledge that sometimes we even willingly embrace spiritually destructive activities. Narottam Das Thakur has written, although I've taken human birth finally, O Lord, I've drunk poison willingly. I have not worshipped your lotus feet, thus I've drunk poison as if it were sweet. So, engaging in material life, neglecting our spiritual life is like willingly drinking poison. Prabhupada mentioned in a lecture I attended in Los Angeles in 1972 that those who come to Krishna consciousness are the most fortunate, and those who leave are the most unfortunate. He went on to explain that those who leave are the most unfortunate because they give up their rare opportunity to engage in devotional service. Thus, they're even more unfortunate than those who never had the opportunity to engage in Krishna consciousness. In the Isa-Upanishad, the word Atmaha is used in Mantra 3. Prabhupada translates Atmaha as killer of the soul, and he writes in the purport, the Vedic scriptures and the acharyas or saintly teachers are compared to expert boatmen, and the facilities of the human body are compared to favorable breezes that help the boat ply smoothly to its desired destination. If with all these facilities a human being does not fully utilize his life for self-realization, he must be considered Atmaha, a killer of the soul. Okay, here's everything for you. You can go back to Godhead and you don't take advantage. It's like many devotees just say, are you going back to Godhead in this lifetime? Maybe. Sankirtan Prabhu is asking if those who leave become fortunate again. And I was just saying to a morning walk when Prabhupada was talking about fortunate, how do you become fortunate? And he says, Prabhupada said, you just take Krishna consciousness. It's not that there's any other way to be fortunate. You just take it. Yeah. There's no qualification. You just, nothing in the past you had to do. Just now take it. Many pious people don't take it, so they did good things in the past. So you want to be fortunate, yeah, just immediately take it up, you're fortunate. Just like that. Today, chant good rounds, fortunate. Of course, we are practicing self-realization. Still, it is helpful to consider that when we are not doing as much as we could to advance in devotional service, we are harming ourselves to some degree. Improving our devotional service is as much an act of self-love as it is an offering of love to Krishna. Thus, advancing in Krishna consciousness certainly involves being kind, compassionate, loving to ourselves, and choosing to act in ways that reflect this. Yes. Are you taking as much responsibility for your spiritual life as you could have, or are you blaming other people, your past, or external circumstances for your shortcomings? Or using blame to your own detriment, using it to sabotage yourself? So, I have this little thing on Facebook that says the video is going to end in 20 seconds. I don't know what that means. I've never seen it before. But it might just disintegrate. We're down to 12 seconds. So let's see what happens. Until the end of the video. There must be some timer that just is going to turn it off. It's like a television show.